Motivation isn't the problem. Hi, I'm Corinne and I just wrote a book. And when did I come up with the idea for this book? 12 years ago. 12. 2014. And it took me till now, 2026, to finish the draft. Is this absolutely shocking? Yeah, kind of. But I bet if you're watching this video, you've probably been in a similar boat. Maybe it's not taken you 12 years to write your book, but it's probably taken you a while. And you're probably sitting there berating yourself for having no willpower and no motivation. And I did the exact same thing for like 9 out of 12 of those years. And then about 3 years ago, I got serious. I kind of started my book over from scratch because I'd written 30 or 40,000 words of it. And I started working on it and I've made it to the end 3 years later. So I've managed to do a whole draft with a lot of planning in advance during those first 9 years. Done the whole draft in 3 years. And there's been lots of times over the past 3 years where I didn't write for months on end. If you added up only my productive months, I probably could have had this book written in 1 year. And to be honest, the last like 12, 20,000 words I did in about 4 to 6 weeks, right before my due date that I set for myself. So yes, I could have finished this book much, much quicker. But there's many reasons why I didn't. And these reasons are probably going to resonate with lots of you as well. So I wanted to talk through it today. And I wanted to try and get rid of some of the shame that we might have around not writing our books. And I don't think we should be ashamed because, for the most part, this shame isn't helpful. As in, little tiny bit of shame, good sometimes, small doses can kind of negatively motivate you to do the thing. But if you're using too much shame, it just becomes a big toxic mess, and then you won't want to write at all. So I think it's important that we be a bit more objective and a bit more rational about why we're not writing and not just use shame to make us finish the draft. Now, if you know me or you've been on this channel a while, you will know that I'm professionally a behaviorist, specifically an equine behaviorist, hence some of the horses on my bookshelf. But a lot of the fundamentals of behavior, it's essential for all animals, including humans. Learning theory and how kind of living beings work, how they're motivated, how they go on to do behavior, it all works in kind of the same way. For example, we are positively reinforced for doing things when we get a reward out of it. We also don't do things that we're punished for doing, and we can also all be motivated through negative reinforcement, which is kind of how this shame operates. We feel shame, we feel shame, we feel shame. It's this constant aversive pressure, and then when we write, the shame lifts and we're alleviated from the shame, and thus writing is reinforced. But the problem with negative reinforcement, it's the same problem we have with horses and animals, is it doesn't make you like doing that thing, it just makes you do the thing to avoid that nagging pressure. And animals and people, we tend to do a bit better, as in feel better about doing that behaviour when we've got a reward, an actual positive reinforcement, a little bit of food, for example, if you're a horse. And if you're a person, it's a little bit more complicated because you can't just give yourself a little snack every time you write. You could say, I'm allowed to have this very special little treat every time I do a writing session, and that might motivate you to do it, but might be a bit counterintuitive if that treat's not very healthy, and you might develop some sort of weird disorder to do with writing and eating. So we have to find other ways to positively reinforce ourselves for writing. And that can be positive self talk, but most of us are a bit more motivated by the negative, shameful self talk. We might downgrade that, oh, well done, you did really well, and not really feel that rewarded from that kind of talk. If we're enjoying the writing process itself, then that can be quite self reinforcing. It's quite rewarding. You cracked that little bit of that plot problem, you wrote a scene that was really fun to write. But the thing about writing is that while there are fun moments, there's a lot more moments that are just hard. It's this hugely complex activity mentally. Even if you're writing a fun scene, there's a lot of logistics to work out. You're thinking about every word that you write, you're thinking about what those characters would do, and it's just difficult. And the big reward of finishing that book is so far in the future that we can't really use that to reward ourselves for those day to day sessions. And even once we get there and we finish the draft, then you've got to edit it, then you might want to publish it, then your goalposts move to like sales or getting a literary agent. And we kind of push off that positive reinforcement into the future. And thus, writing becomes something that doesn't have a lot of inbuilt opportunities for positive reinforcement, which just makes it really hard. And when things are really hard, we're not motivated to do it. So, there, even though I've just said motivation isn't the problem, I guess it kind of is in some ways when you break it down into that behavior theory. But I think a lot of us, when we think about motivation, we're almost thinking about our values and us as a person. Like, it's ethical and it's admirable to be a highly motivated person. We see someone that's very motivated as having good willpower, being very conscientious, having a good work ethic, and all of these things equal good person. So when we're not motivated, we label ourselves as bad person. And what I'm saying is that that isn't true at all. The same way I wouldn't call a horse or a dog bad because it's not motivated to do a specific behaviour, I would just say, well, you've not really set them up to want to do that behaviour. They're not getting anything out of it, so we just need to set them up for success, set up the environment, set up our reinforcement schedule so that they are motivated to do it. So, with that in mind, have a think about your current writing project and think about you as a person and your life in general. It takes analysis of all of these things to figure out exactly why we're not writing and how we can rearrange these things to make writing something that's easy and something that we can do. This is exactly what we should always do when we work with animal behaviour. If a horse has a behaviour problem, you say, okay, well, do they have friends and forage and freedom? Are their fundamental needs met? Are they in pain? Is their environment terrible? Because if it is, we can't expect them to behave like the perfect horse. And we are the same way. If you have a chronic illness, you're constantly in pain, you have chronic fatigue, things like this, it makes a lot of sense why you're not going to want to sit down, use really high mental processes to do something difficult like write a book. Not saying that people with chronic illnesses don't write books, because they do and they do all of the time, but they kind of assess their life, they assess their energy, they assess their symptoms, and they schedule writing for when they feel good. One of the things that you need to bear in mind when you've got chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, is that you can't push through. When you push through, it only gets worse and you end up way more burned out. And so people schedule things around their chronic fatigue. They schedule their exercise around chronic fatigue to just do what they can cope with and stretch themselves by little tiny steps. They don't take big steps and overreach themselves because they know they'll just end up in bed for days. So if this is you, if you have some of these bigger issues going on, adjust your expectations and pace yourself, break it into small steps, and really set yourself up for success. And then measure that success by your own yardstick, not by what everyone else is doing. You know, I have energy issues and I sometimes feel bad about my physical health and my physical fitness. And it's very easy to kind of throw yourself into a workout program, burn out, and then end up sick. So I've had to really learn this pacing myself in that sense, and also when I'm writing. And we're all different, we're all individuals, so make writing work for you. And if that means that weeks go by and you don't write because you weren't feeling well, that's fine. And don't punish yourself for that. Wait till you're feeling better and then reward yourself for getting back on the horse, so to speak. It's all about not letting these little setbacks or little periods of time where we're not writing develop into us just not writing at all. I, over the years, had periods where I wrote and then fell off because of this, that, or the other, and I didn't get back on for 6 months or a year or more. And how I was eventually able to finish this book over the past 3 years is every time I was knocked down by something, every time I felt ill and I couldn't write for a month or two, I didn't let it stop me completely. I scheduled the time, and as soon as I was able to, I got back to writing once I felt better. And in the similar vein of physical health, mental health is equally important. Sometimes we're harsher on ourselves when we've got depression or anxiety or ADHD for not being able to push through that, but you kind of need rest in the same way. And if you're close to burnout or you're in a really fragile mental state, again, falling into these negative patterns of shaming yourself and berating yourself isn't going to help. Try your best, but don't expect perfection. And if you've got ADHD or autism or other similar neurodivergence, you may have executive dysfunction issues, and these really do have significant impacts on how we get things done. It can make it seem like we have no willpower or no motivation, but actually, it's a problem of switching tasks, or it's a problem of needing routine and schedule, or needing freedom and not wanting to be tied down by a schedule. Everyone's different, and it doesn't just apply if you've got neurodivergence, because everyone can have levels of executive dysfunction. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have all of the other criteria for autism or ADHD, but have a look online, do some research about executive dysfunction, and look at some of the tips and advice out there for dealing with executive dysfunction, because that will probably really help you with your writing as well, from that mental standpoint and from that scheduling standpoint. Talking of schedules and schedules of work, we also do this with animal training. We kind of look at our antecedents to the behaviour that we're doing, and we rearrange them, we set them up for success. This might mean if there's a certain time in that horse's routine where they're displaying a certain behaviour issue, we might try to modify the environment, like have protected contact, have a fence between the person and the horse, to kind of manage the behaviour. Or if there's a time in a dog's routine where they're showing a certain behaviour issue, like they're coming and barking at the door whenever someone rings the door, and they're making escape attempts out the door. You might have an antecedent arrangement where you have a baby gate and they go to the kitchen. You train them to go to a certain area when they hear the door knock, so that that behaviour is not a problem. And by having that baby gate at the kitchen door or something, that's an antecedent arrangement that prevents the kind of dangerous consequences of that behaviour as well. So it keeps everyone safe, and it will probably reduce the behaviour over time as well. How antecedent arrangements relate to us and our writing is, ask yourself when you're scheduling your writing. And is this just a bad time? Or are you just setting yourself up for failure? Say you've had a long day at work and you come home and you're trying to sit down at your desk and write immediately. You're probably knackered and your brain is probably really fried. The moment you get home, it's probably the last thing you want to do. And so you're probably going to avoid writing. And maybe you're doing it as soon as you get home from work because you kind of want to get it out of the way, or you think you're going to be too tired later on and you want to capture that energy while you have it. Or you think, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it later in the evening because I'm going to be settled down, I'm going to be in my pajamas, and I'm going to be on the wind down. And this might be a bit of a constraining belief, because then you're getting into a bit of an all or nothing mentality about it. You're going to come home, not feel like it, not write, and then be like, well, that's the day done. Rather than saying, purposefully, I'm not going to write as soon as I get in. I'm going to get changed into pajamas. I'm going to have some dinner. I'm going to watch an episode of my TV show. And then at 7:30, if I feel up to it and I'm not exhausted and falling asleep at the TV, then I'm going to do a writing session. And maybe in the future, if I feel really up for it when I get home from work, I might do a writing session at that time, but I'm going to make it acceptable and part of my kind of mental model of how things work to instead do a writing session at 7 p.m. Just by changing how we think about it and having a bit of mental flexibility, we might find ourselves fitting in more sessions than we would have originally. And we might find that actually that 7 p.m. writing slot works for us way better. And we're going to view writing as less of a chore and less of an aversive, or something to just tick off and get out of the way for the day. And thinking about your emotions through all of this is really important. A certain amount of willpower and a certain amount of making yourself do things you don't want to do is kind of needed, because writing a book is hard and it's not a walk in the park and it's not fun all of the time. Sometimes it takes getting started and building that momentum before that inspiration and that motivation eventually comes. But if every writing session has this negative cycle of shame or seeing it as a chore, it's just going to make you feel negative overall, and you're going to fall out of love with writing completely. So I know I said it earlier, but I'd really caution you about introducing all of these negative emotions into the schedule of work. Try to keep your emotions and attitude about it positive and helpful, even if the task itself is hard. And finally, let's talk about your writing project itself, because it's possible that you and your emotions and your willpower and motivation and life aren't the problem, and the project itself is actually the problem. Ask yourself, why are you writing this book? And I think your why has to be a little bit more than because it's just fun. Unless every time you sit down to write, it is fun and it's a joy and you don't care about your objective, you don't care if you finish the book, then that's fine. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to people that are writing kind of a serious book that they want to get to the end of and have some goals for. For that kind of writing project, you need a strong why beyond just kind of doing it. And unless you're a professional writer already that's got a lot of books out there, I don't think your motivation can be like for the money. Because let's be honest, it's probably not going to make you money. And you're also not going to see that money for quite a long time. And you're going to be taxed on it. And it's going to be split into different payments. So even if you do end up making a lot of money on it one day, it's not strong enough why for the current writing of it. I really think in order to really get a book finished, you kind of have to really believe in it. You have to really care about the characters and the subject matter. You have to really enjoy going to that place, going to that world. Perhaps the themes are really important to kind of a global issue, or something that you want to put out there that has this potential to like change the world. And that sounds really dramatic and also probably quite over ambitious. But having this really ambitious why can really help motivate you to write when it is hard. Like my book is a dystopia, so it's got quite a lot of quite strong whys in that regard. It's kind of a cautionary tale, and it's got themes related to what I'm passionate about in life and what I value at my core. And so my reason for wanting to put out the book for public to read and not just like print it privately for my friends and family, it's got a bigger ambition. And it doesn't really matter if that never comes to fruition, because I'm fairly realistic that that might not happen and that it's probably not going to save the world or be life changing. But if one person gets a lot out of it, one person finds it meaningful, then I will be happy. And I'm driven by the challenge of doing something that's ambitious. And if that doesn't resonate with you, if it's not really about a why in that regard, and you actually do want to sell it and have a market and build a career out of it, I think that's a really strong why as well. Separate from the money thing, it's a really good why to want to publish, to want to build a career, put several books out there, be able to go part time one day perhaps. I think that's all valid as well. It's about building your dream life, it's about self actualization. And that can be really great for our drive as well. I think that's quite true for me as well. Like when I talk of the themes of my novel and how I kind of want it to have an impact and how I want to challenge myself to write something ambitious, it does all boil down to self actualization. Like, I don't think writing will ever be my primary career. I'll always have being a behaviorist as my primary career, but this is like something extra on top that I really care about. And I think that's part of why I couldn't write this book 12 years ago when I first came up with it, and for the 9 years after that. Because self actualization, if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is quite outdated and has some flaws, but I think is quite valid in my specific writing example anyway. Self actualization is right at the top of that pyramid, and at points after I came up with the idea and then the years afterwards, there were needs further down the Maslow's pyramid that just weren't met for me. I graduated uni without much of a plan, or the plan that I originally had, I figured wasn't really for me anymore. I was working part time in a job that I didn't like, that was just a cashier kind of depressing job. I had loads of time to write, but the pressing matter was, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to live? Who am I going to spend my life with? These were all up in the air because I was 23, just graduated, and had no idea. And it took quite a lot of time for me to find a place to settle, find a full time job that was fulfilling and in the career path that I wanted. I spent a lot of time getting my master's, getting my certifications in behaviour. That was a focus for a long time, and writing a book just fell to the bottom of the pile. Also, dating, finding a partner, making new friends in the city where I live now, building that social network, having my social needs met, having my more fundamental needs met of having a full time salary and being able to pay my rent. These were all problems in my 20s that I felt did kind of block me from getting to that self actualization point. I had some mental health problems, which takes away some of your health needs from the pyramid. It just wasn't as important as getting these things sorted. And 3 years ago, when I finally got back to writing this book, started it fresh, it's when these things started to iron themselves out. And when I've been most productive with this book, it's when I've got my certification, I'm settled in a full time job that I've got to grips with, that I'm doing well. I've got a loving partner. I've got a social network of friends. I just bought a house. My mental health and physical health is better. All of these kind of more important needs are falling into place, and it finally freed me up to finally self actualize. And before I had this house and this office and this bookshelf, I was just writing in bed or writing in noisy cafes. I didn't have a really nice working space. It was very blended with my normal life when I was working part time. I didn't have a consistent routine. I also didn't have as much energy because it was more hands on work. Now that I've got a really nice writing space, I've got a really nice balanced working routine, I just have capacity and it's all fallen into place. And I've been able to actually finish the book, and that is amazing. I finally have the wellness, I finally have the kind of antecedent arrangements. I have my needs met, and that has been really instrumental in me writing the book, self actualizing. So I could probably go on, but I'm going to stop there. If you are struggling to write your book, you're blaming yourself, have a think about what I've said and do a bit of an assessment of what's going on in your life and figure out what works for you and how you might be able to adapt things so that you can start making your routine work for you and your motivation work. And if there are bigger problems in your life beyond writing this book, maybe cut yourself some slack. I'm not saying that they're going to stop you from writing a book, because you absolutely can still achieve your dreams, but make adaptations for yourself. Don't work yourself into burnout or chain yourself to the desk until you hate writing. It's your life, it's your passion project, so make it work for you, and then you will work for your dream. That's all for today. There's probably some craft reasons why you might not be motivated too. Like there might be some issues with your book and you're having some difficulties and sticking points that are making it extra difficult. I don't want to give specific writing advice here because I think I'm still learning as well, but get some craft books, go on YouTube and look for some other writing advice from people that have the skills to give you that advice. Do some courses and look for some resources that will help you kind of assess and diagnose the issues in your manuscript, because that might help things as well. And subscribe for more content about writing and also videos about what I read as well. That's mostly what I do, to be honest. But if you like more videos like this about writing and about specifically behaviour and psychology around writing, let me know, because I am a psychology behaviour nerd. So I'm happy to answer any questions or do a bit of research and do videos on specific topics along those kind of lines. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video. Bye!